This is the epic history of the second deputy president of Kenya, Geoffrey Rigathi Gachagua.
Rigathi Gachagua.
In his early days, when he was a young student at the University of Nairobi, Rigathi Gachagua's life changed dramatically when he met President Daniel Moi, and Moi gave him a secret job as a spy for the government of Kenya.
And we were very tolerant. Our members wanted to throw him out, but we say let's wait and hear.
These here are Rigathi Gachagua's biggest secrets, from his days as a university drama actor to becoming a spy for Moi's government, then to narrowly escaping death by the alcohol addiction that killed all his blood brothers.
I, Rigathi Gachagua,
do swear
that I will always.
Is it true that Rigathi Gachagua's relationship with late President Daniel Moi was that of a man and his biological father, or was that just another bad rumor about him?
How was your relationship with the President Moi?
Good.
You were buddy?
Oh yeah. He was a good old man. Very fatherly.
Is it true that Rigathi Gachagua's wife, Pastor Dorcas Rigathi, wanted to end her life on the same day that Rigathi met her and her mother at President Moi's house at Cabernet Gardens? Rigathi Gachagua was born on the 28th of February 1965 in the village of Rogoro, Madera constituency. The location where he was born is known as Herega location of the then Nyeri district. Rigathi's father was a man who used to help the Mau Mau. His name was Nahashon Gachagua Rediani, and his mother was known as Martha Kirego, and she too participated in the Mau Mau War for the independence of Kenya.
And for those who do not know, the deputy president is half Meru, half Kikuyu. His mother, the late mother Kirigo Gachagua, was born in Meru in a place called Katheri.
When Rigathi Gachagua was born, independence had already been won, but his family still lived in one of the special villages where colonialists had isolated Kikuyus during the state of emergency in the 1950s. At the time, Mzee Nahashon Rediani had sired 7 children, and he was a known mechanic who had been making and fixing guns for the forest forces before the 1963 independence.
Welcome to the club of truthful men.
To avoid arrest during the state of emergency, Mzee Rigathi Gachagua had joined the others in the forest as his wife Martha Kirego, a daughter of Meru, served with the women who would risk their lives by carrying food to the edge of the forest for the Mau Mau soldiers to pick it up and eat. In those days, before the colonialists left Mlima Kenya, the white government had forced the people of Kikuyu, Embu and Ameru to live in the villages known as reserves, where deep ditches were dug around the whole village and nobody could leave or come out without passing through a common, well-guarded gate. It's inside a ditch like this in a Tetu village of Nyeri that Dedan Kimathi, the main leader of the Mau Mau, had been arrested in October 1956. While growing up in the early years of independent New Kenya, Rigathi Gachagua and his siblings were raised in poverty inside their houses made out of grass in the village of Rogoro. As Rigathi Gachagua was being born on the final day of February 1965, his other brothers, all 7 of them, had already been born, and their names are as follows. Among his brothers is the late Nderito Gachagua, who died abroad at the Madsen Hospital as he was receiving treatment for pancreas cancer in the city of London. At the time of his death, on the 24th of February 2017, Nderito Gachagua was the serving governor of Nyeri County.
Ati hawa wabunge wa MCAs wameweka kwa bajeti yao shilingi milioni 90.
Another one of Rigathi Gachagua's brothers is the late Fred Wachira, who was a doctor in South Africa up until his death. Rigiji himself would later tell reporters that Dr. Fred Wachira had died from issues related to long-term alcohol abuse, and he, Rigathi himself, had traveled to South Africa to fetch his dead brother's body. James Rediani Gachagua was Rigathi Gachagua's eldest brother, the firstborn son of the family, who died on the 8th of May 2022 at the ripe age of 78 years. For James Rediani, the firstborn, when his younger brother Nderito Gachagua had declared to run for Nyeri governor in 2013, James tried to vie for his small brother's then vacant Madera MP seat, but he lost at the ballot to his competitor Peter Weru. Jackson Reriani, another one of Rigathi brothers, was the most recent one to pass away in the evening of the 24th of September 2023, while Rigathi Gachagua was just 1 year into office as deputy president. Like his elder brother James, Jackson was an engineer who was also reported by Rigathi to have lost his life to excessive drinking. Jackson had paid for his brother Rigathi's education, and this made the two of them become very close throughout their lives.
Jackson Reriani was a very successful member of our family. He was working at Metal Box in Thika. He had a good job, and actually he is the one who educated me.
When kicking off his campaign against alcoholism in Mount Kenya while still in office in 2024, Rigathi testified that his four dear brothers, Wachira, Nderito, James and Jackson, all passed away as a result of prolonged abuse of alcohol, and that he, Rigathi, used to be a heavy drinker himself when he was still a young government officer, but he had stopped the habit with the help of his dear wife, Dorcas Wanjiko.
I used to drink a lot myself. Oh, a lot. Beers. A crate and a half. There is a bar called Citrus next to Jamhuri High School. It used to be very nice there. There was a one-man guitar there, and I have had some little money. So I would stay there up to morning.
However, growing up, Rigathi Gachagua did not have just brothers for siblings. He had sisters too, and their names are as follows: Lilian Wango, Linda Modoni, Eunice Nyangare, and Jennifer Gasheke. Johnson Kibara, James Reriani, Peterson Wachira, Leah Wangari, and Josephine Wangari are all Rigathi Gachagua's half-siblings who were born to Mzee Nahashon Reriani's second wife. When the new year of January 1971 came, Geoffrey Rigathi Gachagua, just a mere boy in the village, was enrolled at Kabiroine Primary School, a 5-kilometer trek from their village in Rogoro, Herega location. Rigathi's old classmates at Kabiroine Primary remember him as a sharp boy who would emerge top of his class, performing exceptionally well, especially in English and mathematics. Others, like the Mason Joseph Ongombe from Madera, told reporters that back at Kabiroine Primary, Rigathi would share sweets with other children in class and also helped out those not as fast as he was with their homework and assignments. Rigathi sat his first national examination, back then known as Certificate for Primary Education CPE, in 1977 from Kabiroine Primary, and the following year, the year the first Kenyatta died, Rigathi joined Kianyaga High School in Gishugu, Kirinyaga, where he'd start his secondary school journey. Many years later, when Rigathi Gachagua would visit his old school in his capacity as Deputy President of Kenya in 2023, Gachagua would reminisce on how he had been a difficult student who got in trouble often. His old school principal back then, Mr. Julius Canon Dombi, had punished him over 400 times in the period he was at Kianyaga, at least by Rigathi's own account. Rigathi had also told stories of having had jiggers in his feet growing up in poverty, and even as he was joining Form 1 at Kianyaga High School. In the early days of the school, the dormitory walls were still made of plastered cow dung mixed with water and mud. And here too, the legend was like in any other Kenyan boys' secondary school, where the school's kitchen staff stood eternally accused of sprinkling mafutata, kerosene, on the githeri they fed to the boys to cool down their teenage fever. After he had been elected as deputy president to William Ruto, Rigathi Gachagua took his two boys, Keith and Kevin, to see the corner where he had slept all those years back in the dormitory known as Ndagana House at Kianyaga. On his visit as an old boy in 2023, Rigathi announced that he had gifted the school a brand new school bus, and on top of that, he gifted the students and teachers some 800,000 shillings to throw themselves a party. Rigathi Gachagua completed his ordinary level education in Kianyaga in the year 1981, and he then sat a national examination known as Certificate of Education (KCE), which he did well in and qualified for the next phase of his education. Therefore, in the following year, 1982, Rigathi returned to Kianyaga to kick off his A-levels education, that is Form 5 and Form 6. He achieved his advanced levels certificate in 1983, passing with 3 principals and 1 subsidiary division. One of the subjects which Rigathi did very well in was English literature. Rigathi and his colleagues at Kianyaga were among the very first cohorts of the Kenyan learners who would graduate under the older 7423 education system of Moi, which was replaced also under Moi by the now famous 844 learning system in 1985. Back then, Form 6 graduates admitted to join university would have to wait 2 years before joining their respective campuses. Rigathi completed his examinations at Kianyaga Kirinyaga at the end of 1983 and then returned home in Nyeri for a while to wait for university admission. In this period, Rigathi got an opportunity to teach English grammar and literature as an untrained teacher at a secondary school in Machakos County known as Kwandanse Secondary School. From his impressive skills at the game of volleyball back in his Kirinyaga school days, Rigathi Gachagua started training his Kwandanse students in the sport of volleyball, and his team continued to do well even long after he had left teaching them to go join uni.
I was teaching history and English and literature. And then in October 1985, I went to the NYS. There was a compulsory program for pre-university training for discipline and basic training.
And therefore, after the long wait, it came with little surprise when this boy of Rigathi Gachagua received his letter to go study for a degree in political science and literature at the University of Nairobi.
And then I joined the University of Nairobi in late 1985.
This degree program at the UON would later be renamed to become Government Studies, although the university still teaches both political science and literature. In his time as a student at the University of Nairobi, Geoffrey Rigathi Gachagua involved himself in various student groups and activities. His first group at the university was the Association of Literature Students, in which he became one of the leaders, and on top of that, owing to his training in literature, Rigathi was a great stage actor who played in the university's free traveling theatre group, acting out various well-known school plays. After he had settled down well enough at the UON, Rigathi Gachagua started getting himself into university student politics, and he joined the organization of fellow students who came from Nyeri to the university. The group, then known as Nyeri University Students Association, would eventually elect Geoffrey Rigathi Gachagua as their overall chairperson. Maybe coincidentally, it's in this same period of the late 1980s, deep into the Nyayo regime, that Kenya's fifth president William Ruto was also at the same University of Nairobi. William Ruto was then the chairperson of the Christian Union CU on the campus, but also, just like Rigathi, Ruto also led the tribal organization of students from his own home district, which was known as the Uasin Gishu University Students Association. This was an era in Kenyan history when university students had become major players in national politics, and there was a big split in ideology between the students who supported the leadership of Daniel Moi's KANU and those who opposed Moi. And therefore it became so that President Daniel Moi's government was looking for active leaders among the university students population in Nairobi who would be used as ambassadors for the president and his regime amongst the restless university comrades. After the now famous 1987 student protests that were led by Miguna and Wafula Buke, President Daniel Moi had reactively declared illegal the student organization of Nairobi University, simply known as SONU, and his aim was now to cultivate a new crop of influential university students that would be very pro-KANU. And therefore, with this goal in mind, the top don at the UON, Vice Chancellor Professor Philip Mbidi, a Kikuyu academic who worked with Moi, was given the task to find brilliant student leaders from within his city campuses. Geoffrey Rigathi Gachagua was among such student leaders who had long been spotted by Professor Mbidi, especially from his leadership at the Nyeri University Students Association (DUSA). In this period, when Rigathi Gachagua was advancing his education and finding a place in political leadership in Kenya's top university, the university leader Professor Mbidi was himself continuously becoming more trusted by Moi, and with the young emerging Kikuyu student leader having caught the eye of the keen VC, this was silently creating a possible direct path to greatness for young Rigathi. By June 1987, Rigathi Gachagua and other select students were summoned to the office of the Vice Chancellor, and they were informed that they had been chosen for a visit to President Daniel Moi. Back then, every district in Kenya would take turns to send a delegation of their best university students to see Daniel Moi. Therefore, when Rigathi Gachagua first went to see Moi, was with other students from his district. Professor Philip Mbidi personally put Rigathi Gachagua in charge of selecting those among his fellow Nyeri students to go see Moi on the appointed day. As part of his assignment, Rigathi went to Kenyatta University, the only other big university in the city back then, to recruit their student leaders for the Moi delegation. It's while on this mission in KU that he would meet his future wife Dorcas Wanjiku. Dorcas Wanjiku was a student here at Kenyatta University, and when Rigathi saw the young woman, he says he fell in love with her at first sight.
So my wife, Pastor Dorcas, is not lost.
According to the second lady's own telling, the day they met was on the 17th of June, and she says his outstanding brown-colored suits and matching necktie made him leave a mark on her. However, in spite of Rigathi Gachagua's attraction to Dorcas and his decision to add her name to the list of those intended to go see the president, his aim to convince her to be his wife was not going to be achieved that easily. Dorcas Wanjiku narrates how by the time she and Rigathi were meeting, she was going through a difficult patch in her life, weighed down by depression and hopelessness as a daughter of peasants in Mount Kenya struggling through university, and at the time her father had been arrested and incarcerated, leaving their family desolate. Finally, few weeks after the encounter of the two future lovers, in July 1987, the day that the students on Rigathi Gachagua's list were supposed to go see President Daniel Moi arrived. On that day, when Dorcas Wanjiku arrived with the others, she caused a scene. She rushed to President Daniel Moi in a desperate attempt, risking being shot by President Moi's personal security, who were always alert to sudden danger. She was, however, not shot before reaching Moi, but instead, she narrates that Mzee saw her rushing towards him and stood to embrace the scared young woman. Moi spoke to Dorcas and reassured her, even giving her direct life advice there and then to help her cope with what she was going through. On top of that, President Daniel Moi invited Dorcas with her mother and siblings to come visit him at his Kabarnet Gardens in Nairobi that next day. In a twist, Pastor Dorcas remembers that when she arrived with her family to meet the president that next day, she was pleasantly surprised to find that Rigathi Gachagua too was there with his mother, and it was there without knowing that she met her soon-to-be mother-in-law. She also realized that Rigathi Gachagua had serious connections as a student leader even within President Daniel Moi's inner circle.
Leave him alone. Leave him alone. What's wrong with you?
The life trajectory of Rigathi Gachagua took a dramatic turn after his meeting with President Daniel Moi in 1987. After the Nyeri students delegation had visited Moi at Kabarnet Gardens, Geoffrey Rigathi Gachagua would embark on a relentless mission to completely win the heart of that girl Dorcas Wanjiku and make her his wife. He would then take up the habit of taking a passenger bus from the University of Nairobi's city campus, where he stayed, to Kenyatta University in search of Dorcas. His effort for Wanjiku's attention, however, did not bear fruits for up to 6 months, and sometimes she would even hide away from Aru and Zori hostels in the KU campus to avoid meeting Rigathi. But eventually, Rigathi Gachagua overwhelmed Dorcas with gifts and poems that he would write for her, and she gave in to his advances and became his fiancée.
I used to write poems for her. Yeah. Okay. Dorcas, honey among rocks, lemon of the cloister, soothing balm, the apple of my eye.
The two would get married later in the year 1991 when Rigathi Gachagua was just 26 years old. Geoffrey Rigathi Gachagua's days as a student leader in Nairobi are remembered by many who were with them at the university back then, even less fondly by those who were opposing the Moi government, which Rigathi was defending on campus. Former Director of Communications of the Orange Democratic Movement Party ODM, Mr. Wafula Abuke, who was among top opposition student leaders in the mid-1980s, would remember Rigathi Gachagua as the only student leader among them who had met President Moi one by one in multiple occasions. Buke says that Rigathi Gachagua was such a top-ranking Moi operative on the university campus, such that whenever he passed by a group of idle students on campus, the comrades would lower their voices in fear and respect Rigathi Gachagua.
I'm an active man. I wake up early. I don't take alcohol.
Not just that, Rigathi Gachagua was also well known for having money all the time on and off campus, even though he had come from a low-income, poverty-stricken family in Mount Kenya. Rigathi and others like CU chairperson William Ruto helped Moi's KANU to crack down on organization of anti-government student protests and frequent migomos organized by personalities such as Wafula Abuke and Miguna Miguna. Mr. Buke claims that back then Rigathi was in charge of a secret government spy network that sent undercover officers into the university student ranks to sniff out dissidents who led these constant Moi-era protests. One time back in those days, Wafula Abuke narrates how he was seated drinking at a popular bar in the city known as Simas, and after he had drunk to his fill and was standing up to leave, he dropped his wallet on the floor where he had been sitting. When he reached his house and realized his wallet was gone, he went back to the bar asking after it, only to find his fellow UON student leader Rigathi Gachagua at the same spot where he had been sitting, while holding his lost wallet. Instead of immediately offering back the wallet that Bouke says he had been given as a gift from a friend in Europe, Gachagua invited him to sit down. Then he told him this, and I quote, "Your wallet fell from my pocket, here it is. But since the wallet has no money and you also have no money, leave it with me." End of quote.
And he's rich, filthy rich, filthy rich.
When Geoffrey Rigathi Gachagua finally graduated with a bachelor's degree in political science and literature in 1988, he was offered a government job as a junior secretary in the Ministry of Home Affairs. He started at his new position in May 1989, and this job was offered to him through his connection with another of his university professors, one Davidson Kuguru. Davidson Kuguru had been a lecturer at Rigathi Gachagua's department at the university, who got his big break by being appointed as Moi's new Minister for Home Affairs and National Heritage in that same year. While Rigathi Gachagua was the chairperson of the Nyeri District University Students Association (DUSA), Professor Davidson Kuguru had been the organization's patron. Just like Vice Chancellor Professor Philip Mbidi, Davidson Kuguru was among the Kikuyu professors at the UON who helped to advance and shape Rigathi Gachagua's political career inside the campus. Rigathi did not work for too long at his new station in the Ministry of Home Affairs and National Heritage before he got picked again, this time as a special district officer cadet. But first, to help him into his new phase of his career, Rigathi Gachagua went back to school, attending a year-long training course at the Administration Police Institute from 1990, where he received special training in intelligence and surveillance, the laws of Kenya, as well as combat and paramilitary training. Once he had graduated from the Police Institute, Rigathi was now ready and prepared for his upcoming role as a special district officer, simply known as DO.
After graduation in 1988, 1989, I was employed as a district officer.
Straight from university?
Yeah, straight from university.
His new appointment meant Rigiji would carry out certain political activities on behalf of his elected and appointed superiors, including Minister Davidson Kuguru himself, whose debut in the Moi cabinet had come after Vice President Josephat Karanja resigned from government. In the general elections held in September 1988, Davidson Kuguru decided to run for office against Moi Kibaki after Kibaki had also been ejected from Daniel Moi's reigning Kano. In the 1988 general elections, the young special DOs like Rigathi Gachagua were used to ensure victory for Kano candidates in Mashinani. Special district officers were used to handle informants and spies and undercover operatives who used to infiltrate opposition parties and spread pro-government propaganda to protect President Moi. The secret operation of the special DOs closely resembled those of the Kano Youth Wing YK92 that was spearheaded by the late Cyrus Jirongo and Sam Nyamweya. Before he was promoted by Professor Philip Mbidi, after Mbidi had later become Moi's head of civil service, the Special DOs program, where young Rigathi Gachagua served, was led by a man known as Hezekiah Oyugi. Before his retirement and death, Hezekiah Oyugi had been a permanent secretary in the Ministry of Internal Security, and he was so feared as a permanent secretary such that when some of his junior officers, while speaking to him on the phone, even when driving on the road, would first park the car by the roadside and hear this, they would stand straight up at attention and salute him through the phone even though he couldn't see them. After serving out his stint as a special DO headquartered at the famous Harambee House in Nairobi, Rigathi Gachagua was then dispatched elsewhere, this time as a DO in Kiambaa constituency in the present-day Kiambu County. And it was here as the DO for Kiambaa that Rigathi Gachagua struck up a friendship with a man known as Kuria Kanyigi, who was then Kano district chairperson in the entire Kiambu district. Kuria Kanyigi had a reputation for being a boisterous man who was also very hard on his opponents politically, as well as those who opposed the Nyayo government within his district. As an extension of his duties as a government district officer, Geoffrey Rigathi Gachagua started getting involved in Kano's political activities in the larger Kiambu district, using police to deal with opposition and anti-Moi voices in the grassroots. After serving out as the DO in Kiambaa for a period of time, Gachagua was then transferred to be the new DO in Limuru Division, still within Kiambu District. Not just that, after moving to Limuru, DO Rigathi Gachagua, still a young man, would be seen carrying out minor errands for the wealthy Kuria Kanyigi at his Tigoni home, some of which had nothing to do with his administration mandate as a government DO. It is said that Rigathi Gachagua's relationship with chairperson Kuria Kanyigi would eventually, many years later, come to an end, and the reason was that the two fell out on a business deal they were doing together. At a political meeting organized by the opposition in Limuru one Sunday, DO Geoffrey Rigathi Gachagua Gachagua is said to have gotten agitated after a junior police constable defied a direct order to lob a tear gas canister at a gathered crowd, and he told the shaking officer to give him the canister so he could throw it himself. It is said that this angered the then opposition leader Martin Shikuku, who even threatened to report Rigathi Gachagua directly to Daniel Moi himself, but Rigathi seemed to know that Moi was behind the tear gas thrown at the crowd, and he did not worry about being reported.
How was your relationship with the President Moi?
Good.
You were buddy?
Oh yeah. He was a good old man. Very fatherly. And I used to go and visit him as a student leader, as a district officer.
Okay.
He had time for me.
In 1991, during the campaigns for the 1992 elections, Rigathi Gachagua participated to transport Kanu-sponsored youth to the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport in Nairobi, where the main opposition leader Kenneth Matiba was expected to arrive into the country. Matiba was flying back to Kenya after receiving medical treatment abroad, and the Moi government had planned to have young people form a deceptive crowd of supporters to receive the Kikuyu leader at JKIA. This political move aimed to sow division between Matiba and his fellow principals in the main opposition party Ford to allow for a less popular Moi to win the 1992 elections against Matiba, Jaramogi and Mwai Kibaki. In the Mount Kenya region, a group of young brilliant district officers under the leadership of ministry men like Rigathi Gachagua were used to spread propaganda pamphlets that served to confuse the voters supporting Mwai Kibaki of Democratic Party, DP, and those of Kenneth Matiba of the Ford Asili Party. Where Mwai Kibaki had overwhelming support in places like Meru and his home ground of Nyeri, pamphlets and flyers were being spread at night claiming Kibaki had abdicated his bid for the presidency in support of his fellow Kikuyu Kenneth Matiba. In Matiba's backyard of Murang'a, similar flyers were distributed, this time falsely claiming that Matiba had stepped down from Mwai Kibaki in the presidential race.
Watu ya nyumbani, si hapa ni nyumbani.
Professor Philip Mbedi, the Vice Chancellor at the University of Nairobi, received an unexpected phone call on his phone in his office one morning in 1991, just as the country was warming up for the first multi-party elections that next year. When he picked it up, the voice on the phone was that of the President of Kenya, Daniel Arap Moi, and the President was asking Mbedi to resign from his work as the Vice Chancellor of the university and join the government. President Moi had decided to appoint Professor Mbedi as the head of public service and also the secretary to the cabinet. Moi assured the professor that in his new capacity, he would have great government powers and authority, only reporting to the president himself. Even government ministers would be expected to visit the office of the head of civil service for meetings and briefings, and not the other way around. As Professor Mbedi assembled the team to help in his new capacity as head of civil service, D.O. Geoffrey Rigathi Gachagua was likely among those selected. Their friendship from the University of Nairobi, as well as Rigathi Gachagua's short yet meticulous record as a government administration officer, made the professor to pick Rigathi as his own personal assistant. On the day when Philip Mbedi would be dismissed from his position as the head of Daniel Moi's civil service, Rigathi Gachagua was in his office doing his daily duty as the personal assistant to the big man. This was towards the end of the year 1994. The election was over, and Moi felt that this man had served his purpose during the election period, and as Gachagua would confess to the Nation newspaper in a later interview, Professor Mbedi himself had not expected to be fired by Moi that day. And therefore, when Philip Mbedi was summoned to a meeting by the president at State House, nobody had suspected any trouble. Moi had said he wanted the head of civil service to help him with making changes in his cabinet, and Professor Mbedi unknowingly suggested that some ministers be removed from their positions. After this meeting at State House, the professor had gone back to his office and informed Rigathi and his entire staff about the oncoming changes that he had just helped the president to initiate and write down. Rigathi Gachagua and his boss stayed at the office waiting for Moi's new cabinet reshuffle to be announced on the 7 p.m. newscast, as was customary back then. This did not happen, but instead what was announced was that the Professor Philip Mbedi himself had been effectively removed as the head of civil service and secretary to the cabinet, and he was demoted to a lower rank as the Secretary General of the East African Community. The decision by President Moi really angered Professor Philip Mbedi, who even rejected his new appointment at the East African Community. It got even worse because when Professor Mbidi, in his anger, tried to call the direct line he had been using to speak with the president, the phone was received by a shop assistant at a random cosmetic shop in Nairobi. Later, Rigathi Gachagua would follow the angry Professor Philip Mbidi to his home in Muthaiga, and he tried to convince the professor to accept his new appointment that Moi had given him. Instead of listening to his assistant, Professor Mbidi decided to write an angry letter addressed to the president in State House, Nairobi, complaining about his sudden removal from the office of the head of civil service. After he wrote the letter and posted it, the professor was soon after evicted from his home in Muthaiga, and the government took the house. What followed was a purge of his former friends in the civil service, some being directly relieved of their positions and others getting transferred to work in areas far removed from Moi's center of power in Nairobi. Among them was Mbidi's immediate former personal assistant, Mr. Rigathi Gachagua, who was to be sent to serve in a remote northeastern province post. Luckily for Rigathi Gachagua, he had made other friends in government whose powers extended beyond those of his former boss Philip Mbidi, and those friends helped avert his fate of being transferred to the Kenya-Somali border. In his own admission, Rigathi Gachagua says he spoke to President Daniel Moi himself about this sudden reassignment to the northeastern province. As fate would have it, in 1995, Rigathi Gachagua was promoted from his rank of District Officer number 3 and he became District Officer number 2, and this promotion had him assigned to a new post as the DO of Mumias Division in Kakamega District, Western Kenya. Rigathi would serve as a District Officer in charge of Mumias for 2 years between 1995 and 1997, the elections year. Other places where Rigathi Gachagua ended up serving as DO were Laikipia, Wajir, Turkana and Kirinyaga, all while he continued to rise in rank until he became a District Officer 1, the highest rank held by DOs during those days of provincial administration. After in his later years, he was accused by political opponents of perpetuating tribal violence against his own Kikuyu tribe in Molo. As a District Officer in the build-up to the 1992 general elections, Gachagua denied ever having served as a DO in the division of Molo, Nakuru County.
For the avoidance of doubt, it's good that I put it clearly today during the day.
Through the earlier friendship with Kiambu politician Kuria Kanyege during his early days in Kiambaa and Limuru, Rigathi Gachagua would secure another convenient transfer that sent him back to Kiambu as a district officer still in the 1990s. In his new posting, Rigathi would become the DO of the newly gazetted Tigoni Division, with many accounts claiming that Tigoni Division was gazetted at that time specifically so that Rigathi could be sent there as DO, and Chairperson Kanyege was said to have heavily influenced that gazettement. This same issue even raised concern in Parliament through the complaint of former Limuru Member of Parliament, the Honorable George Nyanja, an opposition politician whose political meetings were being disrupted by Rigiji on orders from President Moi. The final post, where Rigathi Gachagua had served as district officer, was the division called Ngarwa in the then Laikipia district. Finally, in 1999, Rigiji resigned from public service and went into private business.
My wife of 35 years, Pastor Dorcas Wanjiku Rigathi, and my firstborn son, Kevin Gachagua, a software engineer, and my secondborn son, Dr. Keith Ikino, a medical doctor.
In the following year of 2000, Rigathi Gachagua made an about turn into politics again, taking up a new role, this time as a personal assistant to Uhuru Kenyatta, the Kano chairperson for Thika district, who after losing his contest for MP in the 1997 elections was freshly nominated into parliament by his mentor President Daniel Moi. Many believe that Moi himself recalled Rigathi Gachagua from private life to have him help Uhuru Kenyatta with his preparation to inherit Kano and the presidency from President Moi, who was going to retire in the oncoming 2002 presidential elections. Uhuru Kenyatta had lost the 1997 constituency elections to one Moses Mohia, and President Moi had effectively forced a man called Mark Too to give up his nominated slot in parliament for Uhuru, and this Too with the then Kano Director of Elections William Samoei Ruto. Once Daniel Moi announced that he had picked Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta to contest for presidency in the 2002 elections on the Kano ticket, it automatically became Rigathi Gachagua's duty to ensure that Uhuru ran successful presidential campaigns in Mount Kenya and across Kenya.
And then I was recalled back in the year 2001, back into government to be personal assistant to President Uhuru Kenyatta, who was then the Minister for Local Government and a presidential candidate. I was his PA.
Grassroots politics was one of Rigathi Gachagua's major fields of experience by this time. Many years later, after the two leaders had fallen out politically, Gachagua said in public that he had picked up Uhuru Kenyatta from a drinking den and brought him back to political leadership. His remarks were then interpreted as disrespect to the fourth president, although Rigathi would also admit to having had drinking problems himself, saying he would drink more than 30 bottles of beer in a day before his wife Pastor Dorcas helped him out and he quit the bottle. Rigathi would also later claim that Uhuru lacked proper political experience at the time, and he, Rigathi, was forced to teach him most of what Uhuru knows today about grassroots politics in Kenya. Another man who was with Uhuru Kenyatta in the run-up to the 2002 general elections was the first-time MP for Eldoret North and a top Kano operative in Parliament, MP William Ruto. It was in this period of their collaboration that Rigathi Gachagua first made lasting friendships with both Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto.
I served as personal assistant of President Uhuru Kenyatta for 7 years. I believed in him and his leadership long before other Kenyans believed in his leadership.
When Stanley Emilio Mwai Kibaki was announced to be the winner of the December 2002 general elections, Rigathi Gachagua, who by this point had even dropped the name Geoffrey from his official name, says there is none among them in the Uhuru team who had expected Moi to let Kibaki win the election, let alone peacefully hand over power to the new president-elect. As it became apparent that Moi had no intentions of interfering with the 2002 election process, Kibaki's Kanu competitor Uhuru Kenyatta decided to make a public concession speech accepting that Kibaki had won the elections. Even at a time of their political differences later on, Rigathi Gachagua would look back at Uhuru Kenyatta's 2002 concession speech move as a wise move that averted any possible post-election violence in Kenya. Rigathi's candidate Uhuru Kenyatta came second with 3.6 million votes in that election. Further, Gachagua would narrate how he would constantly serve as a mediator in conflicts between Uhuru and William Ruto when the two opposition leaders differed over supporting Mwai Kibaki for his re-election in the 2007 elections.
We can work with you, but
After Kanu had joined the others such as Raila Odinga and Kalonzo Musyoka to say no to the new proposed constitution draft in the 2005 referendum, William Ruto preferred for their party Kanu to remain in Raila Odinga's ODM movement coalition instead of crossing over to support Kibaki's second term. Uhuru Kenyatta, however, was the Kanu party leader, chief opposition leader in parliament and minister for local government, and he decided to steer Kanu back to Mwai Kibaki's side. Rigathi Gachagua left his role as Uhuru's personal assistant in 2006, 1 year before the December 2007 elections. When he was asked by a local journalist about the reason he left the position of Uhuru's PA, Rigathi said that his work helping Uhuru politically had ended after Uhuru decided to take a backseat and help Kibaki's campaign for re-election instead of going against him again in the 2007 contest. And therefore, Rigathi went into private business under his company known as Rido Group of Companies, which he had founded with his wife in the year 2000 after he had resigned from public service. In the period between 2006 and 2017, Rigathi Gachagua maintained a friendship with Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta and even became one of his close informal advisors when Uhuru went for the presidency again in 2013 together with his ICC co-accused William Ruto, and they won. In 2017, Rigath's brother, who had been the Nyeri governor, Honorable Nderito Gachagua, died in London, and Rigathi was tossed back into active politics. This time he ran for an elective position for the first time since his university days and was successfully elected in his first attempt as the Member of Parliament for his home constituency of Madera. As an MP, Rigathi became one of the most vocal MPs who defended Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto's government. Once Uhuru Kenyatta made the handshake agreement with opposition leader Raila Odinga in March 2018, Deputy President William Ruto was unhappy with the move and he began to distance himself from the administration while still holding the office of the Deputy President. Rigathi Gachagua picked William Ruto's side in the fierce Cold War that followed between the president and his number two. After shifting to William Ruto's side, fresh court cases against the Madera MP were brought forward by the Directorate of Public Prosecutions, ODPP.
I have 200 million. That is the money that is held. 200 million.
These court cases served to give Rigathi Gachagua new prominence on the media and in public eye, and by the year 2020, he had become one of the most prominent and vocal Mount Kenya politicians who supported William Ruto for the presidency in the 2022 general elections. In that period, one journalist would ask Rigathi Gachagua about the last time he had spoken to the president Uhuru Kenyatta, and Gachagua's response was that they had not spoken since 2019. In their very last conversation before the fallout, Rigathi says he had asked Uhuru Kenyatta whether he had any problems with him Rigathi supporting Ruto's presidential bid, and Uhuru had said he had no problem with that.
Rais Uhuru Kenyatta, tunakuomba tafadhali rais, usiue mimi vile baba yako aliua JM Kariuki.
A few months to the 2022 presidential elections, where Uhuru Kenyatta supported ODM Raila Odinga, William Ruto embarked on a search for a suitable running mate who would help him win the election against the state-backed Raila Odinga. Ruto needed a popular, financially secure and strong politician for the Mount Kenya to help him get the mountain vote, which Raila Odinga too was eyeing to pull to his side. Those who suggested themselves to be William Ruto's Mount Kenya running mate and potential deputy president were Professor Kithure Kindiki, Senator from Tharaka Nithi, Kirinyaga Governor Anne Waiguru, MP for Kandara Alice Wahome, National Assembly Speaker Justin Muturi from Embu, and Rigathi Gachagua, MP for Mathera. From his short stint in parliament and his being elected only once before, some of his colleagues in the Ruto team felt that Ruto would lose the elections if he went to the ballot with Rigathi as his number 2. However, Ruto, Gachagua and the voters did not seem to think so, and when it came down to choosing between Rigathi Gachagua and Professor Kindiki, Gachagua was given the ticket to be Ruto's 2022 running mate. At the time, many public intellectuals who analyze politics in Kenya gave various opinions on why Rigathi Gachagua was selected above all others to be Ruto's deputy president, often sparking outrageous public debates about his political abilities and shortcomings. In hindsight, especially after he had fallen out and had been impeached from his office with the help of Ruto's friends, many Kenyans would come to believe they now understand what had made Rigathi Gachagua Ruto's only option for beating Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila in 2022. A good example would come even before they got into the ballot, and it was the televised political debate between himself, Rigathi Gachagua, and Raila's appointed running mate, Mama Martha Karua of Azimio One Kenya, a renowned lawyer, where Gachagua surprised many Kenyans with his less inability to debate for a long time very well and eloquently in English, something that he had hidden throughout the campaign period as he helped William Ruto to convince Mount Kenya people that Uhuru's candidate Raila was no good.
It is therefore not possible that the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya has the capacity to deny any part of Kenya resources.
What came to be a widespread belief was that Ruto picked Rigathi Gachagua as his running mate because he needed Rigathi to tell him what Uhuru was thinking, having worked as a personal assistant for the fourth president those many years back. This argument would however seem to be defeated by the fact that Ruto too knew Uhuru Kenyatta for a long time as a result of their work together in politics since their early Kano days. Others would believe that Rigathi Gachagua was the richest among his competitors and that he had the most money to support Ruto's campaign and possibly buy the position of deputy president. Before the 9th August general elections, some 200 million shillings belonging to Rigathi Gachagua had been seized and frozen in the bank by Uhuru Kenyatta's government under the accusation that the money had been proceeds of corruption. Further, Rigathi himself had been arrested by the police and arraigned in court over charges of corruption and theft of public funds. All this adversity from government, Rigathi used as cannon fodder to convince the voters that Uhuru's government was using trumped-up charges against him to punish him for supporting William Ruto's bid in Mount Kenya. It would later emerge that Rigathi's vast wealth, much more than the 200 million shillings, had come from his long-time business activities that he had conducted through his family enterprises, Rido Group of Companies, which he had registered back in the year 2000. In collaboration with his wife Dorcas, Rigathi has been reported to own 15 different companies under the Rido Group of Companies. Rigath's many companies, like those of most men in his line of work, has made a lot of money through contracts while working with government agencies through tenders and procurement contracts, especially in health and agriculture sectors. The back and forth between Rigathi Gachagua and the family of retired President Uhuru Kenyatta would continue for a while before and after Uhuru Kenyatta administration, even after William Ruto's administration had taken over and settled in office after winning the election in 2022. Beginning May 2024, Rigathi Gachagua came out with fresh concerns, saying that certain elected leaders from the Rift Valley were trying to drive a wedge between him and his boss President William Ruto. As this rift between Rigathi and Ruto's camps continued to widen with each passing day, Rigathi Gachagua came out to ask for forgiveness from Mama Ngina Kenyatta and her son and family over the verbal attacks he had sustained against them on behalf of William Ruto during the campaigns.
And I want to challenge William Ruto if he is a man enough to abuse President Kenyatta himself.
Looking back, for many Kenyan people with a keen political eye, this public apology from Riggy offered while Rigathi was still deep inside Ruto's government as the second in command was the first sign that all would not be well for long in the Ruto-Rigathi marriage. As if to confirm growing anxiety with his place in Ruto's government, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua followed up his apology to the Kenyattas by again publicly affirming his willingness to work with his former boss Uhuru Kenyatta. Throughout 2024, the relationship between Ruto and Rigathi Gachagua continued to worsen, with some of the president's close allies even criticizing the deputy president in public. On the 25th and 26th of June, an historical nationwide protest by young Kenyans brought the country to a standstill, and on that day, the protesters overran the National Parliament buildings in Nairobi, forcing the elected members who were inside passing new unpopular laws on taxes to flee the house in terror. And the youth uprisings had been caused by these new taxes that were being introduced through a radical finance bill. At the end of the day, the protesters went back to their houses after causing damages to property worth billions of shillings in just one day across the country. The President William Ruto would later address Kenyans from Nairobi to calm down the temperatures and prevent a third uprising, but his deputy Rigathi Gachagua also held another press conference from Mombasa where he said the national intelligence leadership had failed to warn the president about the protests in advance. From this day, President William Ruto's people in parliament intensified their campaigns against Rigathi Gachagua, saying he was the one who had agitated the youth to come out and protest with the aim of overthrowing Ruto's government.
My community has really spoiled me. I'm so proud the love and the affection my people have shown me.
An angry President William Ruto removed many of Rigathi Gachagua's supporters from government, most of them being politicians from Mount Kenya who had helped campaign for Ruto's Kenya Kwanza side before the 2022 elections with the hopes of being given those positions. On the first day of October 2024, after a long-running smear campaign against the character of Rigathi Gachagua and accusing him of sabotaging William Ruto, especially during the June 25th protests, the president's men in parliament, led by their leader Kimani Ichung'wah of Kikuyu, introduced a motion of impeachment against DP Rigathi Gachagua. The motion was sponsored by Kibwezi Member of Parliament Mwengi Motuse, and many of the members voted in favor to remove Rigathi Gachagua from the office of the deputy president in a move unprecedented under the 2010 constitution.
Kenya iendelee, Kasongo aende asiende.
After the National Assembly had voted in a majority to impeach Rigathi Gachagua, the next motion was for the motion to be debated and voted for in the Senate, the upper house of the Kenyan Parliament. On the 17th of October, as the Senate waited for Rigathi Gachagua to appear before the House for the hearings that preceded the vote against him, the Deputy President was taken ill and admitted at the Karen Hospital under the care of the cardiologist Dr. Dan Gikonyo. The Senate impeached him anyway in a move that would heavily be challenged in court in a later petition by Rigathi himself. Following his impeachment and subsequent removal from office in absentia by the Senate, President William Ruto moved with speed to instill Rigathi's kinsman, Professor Kithure Kindiki, as the replacement deputy, and although the swearing-in of Kindiki was delayed by the court, this would eventually happen on October 31st. In the weeks, months and years that followed his impeachment, Rigathi Gachagua's popularity shot through the roof in Kenya, first in his own backyard of Mount Kenya, then throughout many other opposition counties throughout the country, especially after launching his own political party known as Democracy for Citizens Party (DCP), which many Kenyans would come to believe and see as the main party to compete with William Ruto's UDA in the next general elections of 2027.